And that will only get worse, because when I was ordained in Bridgeport, we had 330 priests 27 years ago. Now we have 140. We're at a deficit of 190 priests. A lot of that are religious, but still, we're at a huge deficit. The offerings really astounded me. A typical Catholic in the Novus Ordo gives 1.2% of his income. And I've had the objections, Father, more wealthy people go to Latin Mass. I had to laugh at that one. You would not believe how many people responded to that first questionnaire and said they gave $0 in the collection, they couldn't afford it. The Latin Mass is an average. There are a lot of wealthy people who go to the Novus Ordo, and it's still only 1.2%. It's an average. It doesn't matter how many rich people or poor people you get coming to your church. It's an average. People can't get that through their head. So 1.2%, Protestants give 2.5%, more than twice as much. In the Great Depression, all Christians, all stripes gave 3.3% on average, which is 0.8% bigger than the Protestants currently give. And guess how much the traditional Latin Mass people give now? 6%. 5 times more than their Novus Ordo compatriots. 5 times more. That parish I went to in Harrisburg, I know a lot about that parish. They have just under 800 people coming on a Sunday, and they bring in $12,000 to $15,000 a week. Can you imagine? $12,000 to $15,000, and they're not alone. It's all over the country. The Latin Mass supports the parish, especially when they're with the Novus Ordo. They give half to 75% of the offerings on a Sunday, even though the Novus Ordo people vastly outnumber them. We also realize that currently, as was talked about by Sherry Waddell, the second largest denomination in the United States behind Catholicism are fallen away Catholics. If you keep your kid going to the Latin Mass from the age of 7, because right now we're practicing at 8%. There's only 8% Catholics coming to Mass on Sundays right now. 8. Before the pandemic, or it wasn't even a pandemic, they were 20%. It has plummeted to 8%. And again, the Latin Mass, they never stopped coming. They kept coming. They kept using holy water. They weren't afraid. They wanted the sacraments. And I had one man tell me, Father, I'm not coming here because I'm scared of any virus. I'm coming here because our Lord is here. That should have been everybody's attitude. Again, when we look at a 7-year-old child raised in a sort of church, going forward, 11 years till they turn 18, he'll have a 5% chance of staying in the church. Put a kid in the Novus Ordo, 5% chance of staying in the church. You put that same 7-year-old in the traditional Latin Mass, he's got a 97% chance of practicing as an adult. You want 5% or 97%? I think our bishops don't want to hear this. They don't want to know what they don't want to know. Remember also that I was interviewed by Dr. Brian Fraley, who was the former director of CARA Catholic Polling. He's a sociologist. He'd been doing it 30 years until he retired. Now he's working for a university in Florida. He told me in my interview, after the interview on the phone, he said, Father, don't you let anyone push you off these numbers. He said, I know you're not a statistician. I know you're not a pollster. I know you're not a professional. You consulted the correct people, and this study, these 2 studies, he said, are unassailable to anybody who's being honest. Now, I had a lot of comments on liturgyguy.com contrary to what I was doing. I had a lot of doors slammed in my face when I started trying to do it. I didn't think it was going to work. And then I started getting things in the mail. I started seeing those numbers rise online. It was a veritable miracle. Because I just used contacts I had. I used people I knew. And I was just persistent. My personality is very very OCD. I just kept calling, kept emailing until somebody answered me. That was the only way that this could have worked, in my opinion. I also talked to Dr. Mark Gray on the phone. We had about a 30-minute conversation 2 years ago. And he's the current head of polling for CARA. He doesn't like the Latin Mass. But he told me, Father, what you're doing needs to be done, but we at CARA wouldn't touch this with a 10-foot pole. It's too expensive, and it's like finding a needle in a haystack. Because when we call home, we have 72 million Catholics that might answer. When we call a home for traditional Latin Mass Catholic, at the time, it was 100,000. Needle in a haystack. Now we fast forward to 2022, 4 years later, I can safely say there are 250,000 Catholics going to Mass every Sunday at the Latin Mass. 250,000. More than double what it was 4 years ago. There were exponential leaps in 2020 and 2021. I've just done another informal survey among 10 parishes in 7 states. From Easter 2021 to Easter 2022. Why is that important? Because of what Pope Francis did in July of 2021 and what he did in December of 2021. You would expect that the Latin Mass would be decreasing now in this last year. Au contraire. The average increase of Mass attendance on Sunday from those 10 parishes was 25%. The Latin Mass is going up 25%, and I can safely say, I don't have numbers for 2022, but I would say it's on the same trajectory as 2019, 3% fall. The Novus Ordo had a 20% fall in 2020 and another 20% fall in 2021. And I believe in 2022, it's leveled off and it'll decrease only by about 3%. But you see the gap, 25% to 3%. That's a 28% gap. That is monumental. Monumental. And when I was in Bridgeport as a seminarian, our vocations director, Father Di Giovanni, now Monsignor Di Giovanni, no friend of the Latin Mass, he at the time said in the 90s, you boys better learn Spanish because Lily White, Fairfield County in the 1990s will have a significant amount of Spanish speakers in the aughts and the teens. He was right. Why? Demographics will roll you over if you don't believe in them. The demographics of the Latin Mass are unassailable. And as my mom always said, if you don't believe what I'm saying, hide and watch. Hide and watch. Finally, I'd like to kind of go on perhaps a little longer than I wanted to. I'd like to end with a few things. The average age of that second survey was 27.4 years. And we know that when the polls were taken by CARA and by Pew, 20 to 29-year-olds are only going to the Novus Ordo Mass as of 2018 at a 12% clip. 12%, even back before the virus, it was 12% of our 20-year-olds. That survey was 27-year-olds on average, and they go. Another thing that I remember coming back to the Catholic Church as a 22, 23-year-old, after I'd been away from the church for 7 years, if I went out of town as a 23-year-old, there was no way I was going to Mass in an out-of-town church. I wasn't going to do it. I wanted to be with my friends, I wanted to drink, I wanted to have parties. These young adults, these 20 and 30-somethings now, when they go out of town, they look it up on their phone, they find a Mass, and they go to Mass. It's totally different. It's in a different ballpark, thank goodness. Something we always dreamed about as seminarians and priests. Then to remember that the renewal, as I said, is through the back door. The law of prayer is the law of belief, and how you pray in the Mass matters. The liturgy forms us. It can also deform us. The Black Mass, the Anglican use Mass, the fruit of the Novus Ordo, deforming, destructive. Pope Benedict himself said a few years ago, criticism of what has happened after the council is not heresy. It's not an indictment of you. Anybody, even our country, we should be able to point out flaws without retribution. If we're critical of the Novus Ordo, it doesn't make us heretics. It makes us realists. Then too, let us remember that I expect that the Latin Mass going forward will help us be more impervious to the attacks of Satan. With all the gun control, all the shootings happening, I come from Texas. When I was in high school, in an all-boys high school, I had a lot of rednecks in my class. They drove their trucks to school and had gun racks. This is the early 80s. Nobody shot anybody, nobody died, and almost all those boys had guns. It's not the guns. I would submit, as you know, it is the morals. As I look around, the only thing not being smashed by the culture is the Latin Mass. Our Eastern Catholics are not growing. Anglicans are not growing. The Neo-Catechumenate is not growing. Other religions, now you have simulated growth from some of the evangelicals, but once the pastor dies or retires, those people disperse. The thing growing right now is atheism and agnosticism. If you stick a Latin Mass family off by themselves, and they're going to the Latin Mass every Sunday at the least, society's not going to bother them, their kids are going to stay in the church. You stick Muslims in a Muslim ghetto, and they'll keep the faith alive. You put them in another neighborhood outside their Muslim fellows, all their kids will leave the faith. The culture will smash them. I'm telling you, it is divine providence. It is our exorcists. They know that the demons fear and hate Latin. The bishops, and I've said it before in sermons, I'll say it again here, the bishops are either complicit with the demons or they're useful idiots. Either one. Because nothing else explains their intransigence against the Mass. No CEO would do what they're doing. I asked a man, I flew to Chicago about 3 weeks ago, stayed with the Institute. It was a beautiful, beautiful couple of days. And my goal was to go to lunch with one of my primary benefactors. He sent me thousands of dollars, probably about $50,000 to $75,000 while I was down in Ecuador for my parish. He owns one of the largest window companies in Chicago. He helps parishes all over the world. I said to him, Mr. Giles, would you tell a customer that your best-selling window could not be available to be installed in their house? I said, that would be financial suicide. Well, the bishops do it. The best-selling part of the church is the Latin Mass, and they're trying to suppress it. Nobody does that. Think of Coca-Cola. Some of you are old enough, 1985. Hundreds of millions of dollars to roll out new Coke. To be fair, their early polling suggested people would like it. They got 1,500 phone calls a day in 1985 saying, what are you doing? Give us the old Coke back. This stuff is awful. I was one of them. I didn't like any Coke. I was a Coke drinker and a Dr. Pepper drinker because my family had a Dr. Pepper bottler. The Coca-Cola executives pulled all the new Coke off in 7 weeks. They ate hundreds of millions of dollars in losses, and that was a lot of money back then, and put Coca-Cola Classic back on the shelves. Our bishops have done the exact opposite. The post office in 2000 with a Madonna stamp. Their best-selling stamp during Christmas, every year, for years running. And because of some bureaucrat, they made up the line that they were having supply issues, and they didn't sell it in 2000. People complained like you wouldn't believe, and we had it back. Smart business decision, not to do away with your bestseller. We must pray, like we've never prayed before, that the church starts realizing through the leaders what works. And a lot of you have heard the dictum that if you keep doing the same failed policy over and over again, that's insanity. It's not a slideshow that's going to help us. It's not another apostolate. It's not a ministry. Nothing's going to help a flawed Mass. Nothing. The traditional Latin Mass, why is it special? Because 98% of the church worships in the Mass of St. Peter. The other Masses are the Masses of the Apostles, the lesser apostles. They are largely nationalistic. We really are the only church that ever did a lot of evangelization. The Roman Catholic Church, with the traditional Latin Mass, is unstoppable. The demons know it, and now you know it. God bless you all. The Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. So we're just going to do some questions.
Test. Questions? I see you there, Michael. We're going to take one up here first. One.
Good evening, Father. Thank you very much for your talk. It was great. As you know, Francis appointed two new cardinals and new positions. And what do you say with Supich, who was, I'm sorry, what is his new title now? Not title, but his new position.
He's working with the CEW, Congregation for Divine Worship, but I'm not sure what his actual title is.
But no, I mean, like, he has a new position of, like, taking care of the liturgy right now.
Yeah, that's what you just said.
Oh, okay. So, you know, he hates the traditional Latin Mass, and so many other people, so many other clergy also. And it's prophetic that they say things like the Catholic Church will have to go underground. And you're telling me, and you have statistics that are saying that the Latin Mass is growing, which is amazing and is wonderful. But prophetically, do you see this perhaps happening with some kind of persecutional way that they're going to suppress the
They could try. I want to preface this by saying Cardinal Supich was my rector when I was at the Josephinum for 2 years. He tried to kick me out twice. I ended up leaving the Josephinum and went to St. Charles. An interesting thing, and I heard Brian Williams tell me this, but it just kind of went out of my head. Brian Williams is the webmaster of liturgyguy.com. And he said, Father, don't you remember I told you in 2019 there were 12 views from Vatican City on my website, your study. And when the second study came out, there were 4 more views. He said, now there's only 875 people that live in Vatican City. It's a pretty good shot that Francis had somebody looking at my studies. That coupled with the whining of the French bishops, I think could have had some effect on what he's trying to do. Now with these 2 new cardinals, I don't think it really matters. What I'm praying for, we're almost certain to get a very progressive successor to Francis. What I'm praying is that he has a conversion. Somehow, some way, he becomes Pope and has a conversion. It's possible. That's probably our only shot to get a good Pope. And way in the back. Where's the microphone?
Next question, please.
Right, we got somebody who can run it back there.
I would like to say that, you mentioned all of these facts that are certainly undisputable, undeniable. Well, these bishops kind of remind me of Lenin, who said, when the facts contradict our theories, it's too bad for the facts. It seems like, and well, I'm just saying this from my own opinion. I think many of these bishops are commies. I'm just going to say that.
Yeah.
Now, then also, I would like to say this too, in addition to that. Many of these bishops, in my opinion, actually, well, it goes along with what I just said. They don't want the Catholic Church to succeed. I'm not saying I read hearts, but this is just my opinion. I think we have many people who are bishops who actually hate the Catholic faith. And I'll say, I don't care who hears me say that. That's my opinion. They hate the faith, and they know what they're doing.
Well, okay, let's look at the apostles. We had 12 apostles, only one stayed by the crucifix.
Yeah.
Now, if you take that ratio, that means the vast majority of our prelates are probably what you say. There are some good ones.
Sure there are.
But they've very much been browbeaten, and they're somewhat afraid. I would encourage everyone to pray for a new crop of bishops, and that can come with the resurgence of the Latin Mass, a new crop of bishops, because right now bishops care about two things. They care about money, and they care about controlling bad publicity.
Yeah.
And they will do anything. They will throw any priest under the bus if he gets in the way of those two objectives. So as traditional Latin Mass Catholics, we have to be wise. And we have to know that our bishop is still our father, no matter what he does badly. We have to pray for him, we have to sacrifice for him, and we have to realize that as a collective group of Catholics, we deserve the bishops we have. We deserve the bishops we have. Once the Latin Mass starts growing, and it is, and it will take over, my belief is you'll see many, many better bishops.
Yes, well, I'm very happy you said that, because I think that what you just said points to the fact that our church is not only a human institution, but it is also a divine institution. I believe it was Hilaire Belloc who, on more than one occasion, said that if our church were merely a human institution, it would have died out centuries ago. And his words, I think, were, "No mere human institution run by such a group of cutthroats, knaves, and fools could have lasted a fortnight," if I remember correctly.
That's pretty close to his quote, yes.
Yes. Well, anyway, I'll turn the mic over to somebody else.
Good evening, sir. Thank you for coming. Father.
No offense taken.
I beg your pardon. I tend to agree with Michael. I think, from what we've been reading, the church has been infiltrated. The church has been infiltrated by communists and Freemasons, and to destroy it. And they are the ones now who are in the hierarchy of being the bishops or cardinals. That explains as well, they have enough money from their activities. They don't really want the money coming from the Latin Mass. It's nothing to them. They have their sources. That's the way I explain it. The other question is, have you been threatened?
No, I've never been threatened, other than by Supich to kick me out of the seminary. But you raise an interesting point, because I've made that point with a lot of my traditional Latin Mass friends. I've seen my sister, I saw my mother give very generous donations, but nothing near what millionaires can give. And these bishops have a lot of millionaire friends who cozy up to them, and they give them a lot of money. So our donations really pale in comparison to that. And they do listen to the money, a lot of them.
Thank you, Father. I have a question. Was Manhattan included in your surveys, like New York or New York State?
I didn't get any, I got some samples from New York. I don't know where they came from. I don't know what parish. but I did get a lot of samples from New York, yes. There were only 11 states, and I believe, yeah, it's Arkansas, even though Arkansas has a standalone Latin Mass, DOS and run. Alabama. Alabama didn't, Montana, Colorado did, Wyoming didn't, so there were 11 that didn't, but 39, so I got, most of the country, for sure.
Hey, Father.
Hello.
Hi. I just wanted to point out one thing. You mentioned some of the statistics that you brought there. One that I always bring out to my CCD parents, because I actually belong to a novice parish. And I tell them their responsibilities as parents and how critical it is that if they don't go to church, it's not happening here. But they don't seem to understand that prior to Vatican II, 80% of Catholics went to church every week, regularly. And the numbers are 23% now. And they're always shocked.
No, as I told you, it was 22% in 2019. Now it's 8%.
Okay, now it's even
8%.
it's even lower. And then when you look at the numbers of kids that the parents only come, so many of my parents are only there so that the kids get the sacraments, meaning baptism, confirmation, First Holy Communion. After confirmation, those kids never show up again. We see that in what the numbers look like. So if that's all they're looking for, we can see where this novice order situation is going to go.
Absolutely.
There's no hope for the novice order.
Do
all I can say is I work with my parents, and some of them will at least come over and at least see what the Latin Mass is all about.
So as a CCD coordinator, you have to know one stat. Every number is down. So the marriage is everything. Marriages are on the rise among traditional Latin Mass Catholics. The one stat in all of the church, can you guess what has been increasing since the council? The only thing. The number of bishops. We had 3,000 bishops in 1965. Today, we have 5,600 bishops.
Wow. Okay.
We're top heavy. We're top heavy.
And it doesn't matter what the reason is, they still are in
Because they
control
go
of the
over
church.
network.
And you have to remember, this is the old church. These guys are all 60 years old and older, so don't be afraid of that. The church has been in far worse circumstances. With these type of numbers, we know where the novice order is, as long as we are loyal and consistent with supporting the traditional Latin Mass and learning as much as we can and bringing people that we can to it. This will prevail. We may never live to see it, but it will prevail. But we think of Athanasius. Athanasius was a bishop, and we're talking at the time when they had just gone through persecutions, and he is the only bishop that wasn't a heretic. So if against those odds, we're still better off than that. So it's just a matter of prayer and continue in staying the course.
Thank you.
Father, I have a big voice. Father, you should take a look at our bulletin
And come here on a Sunday. The dollars that this church is bringing in is phenomenal. And as for candles and devotions and the young men, I'm an older woman and I'm happy to see young male blood in the church. Here it is amazing in this stinking rotten Sodom and Gomorrah, New York City, to have such a pearl as Holy Innocents. It's a miracle.
We got one up here, question up here.
Father, I'd like to take the liberty of just asking one question myself. It might be off topic, but knowing that you are a subject matter expert on the death penalty, and you have spoken about this gun violence and the school shootings, and that it's clearly not the guns, and most of the people here know that. But I would ask you, is there a relationship between the two? Most of these kids, when you do the research, they're coming from the children of the military-industrial complex, many of them. And so, is there a connection there that we're not aware of?
What shocked me was before 1965, when I was doing my Nexus church searches, but back then there was no internet, when I was doing my research in the early 90s. Prior to 1965, no Catholic was against the death penalty, not one. Then you get into the late 60s, and almost nobody, no Catholic, is for the death penalty. What the heck? Vatican II. It is like it was whitewashed. The opinions were whitewashed. And when you go back and you look at the traditional stance of the church, the popes consistently said that the lack of the consequence of the death penalty will result in more crimes. Now, I hear sociologist after sociologist saying that's a fallacy, but it's very real. When I was a hospital chaplain for 8 years in the VA system, people who thought they were going to live longer largely would not receive the sacraments. They told me they didn't need them. If somebody knew they were about to die, they wanted confession. They wanted a Holy Communion. If you know you're about to be executed, it's a far more likely situation that you will repent than if you stay and rot in your jail cell. I would say too, in Texas, we don't let these guys live. If you've ever seen, they usually shoot the guy dead, our law enforcement in Texas. The guys who do live, remember, they're largely not going to repent. And they're largely going to be in a jail cell for the rest of their life when we know they killed multiple people and there were multiple witnesses. Why are we letting those people live? It should be automatic if you go down that road. And that would, I think that would help a lot. And some people say that statistics don't bear that out, but I would beg to differ. Because again, the practical experience I have, now I didn't visit the inmates on death row when I visited the prisons in Ohio, but I did talk with a lot of guys, especially the young juvies, and they're not scared. They're not scared. They say, I'll do my time and I'll probably get on good behavior, no matter what I do. Yes. Oh wait, we had one up here. He hasn't asked a question yet.
So my question is concerning the atheists and the agnostics. Do you think that, probably, providentially, the Latin Mass will take all those people in at some point, but do you think that there are many more converts to the Latin Mass than the Novus Ordo? And is there some, and also, maybe you mentioned this before, is your study published anywhere?
Yes.
Okay.
Latin, liturgyguy.com. Liturgyguy.com, you put my name in a search, and all my articles will come up. So, and I hate, sometimes I dislike when the speaker says, that was a great question. That was a great question. Because I failed to mention that we know right now, in the Novus Ordo, about 2% of the people who come to the Novus Ordo were converts. 2%. My study proved that in the Latin Mass, it's 20%. 10 times greater. There's lots of converts. And the bishops, especially Bugnini, when he said that awful statement back in the early 60s, that we want to appeal to Protestants, he was dead wrong. Before the council, we had lots of converts. And we've gone down to 2% as a result of his ill-advised Mass. Thank you for bringing that point up.
Thank you.
Yeah, she's coming. She should be coming back to you. Run! Very good.
I would like to add to what he just said. Back when my parents became converts to the Catholic faith, both my father and mother, all you had was the Tridentine Mass when they became Catholics. But the next point I wanted to make with regard to the death penalty is that it's very interesting to note that many of our popes were noted for applying the death penalty in the papal states. I think Sixtus V, he had so many criminals decapitated and their heads hung from the Sant'Angelo Bridge. They said there were more heads hanging from the Sant'Angelo Bridge than there were melons in the marketplace. So like you said, this is kind of new.
Well, and one thing that really touched me when I was doing my research, there was a quote by Pius XII in 1955. He gave a talk to Italian jurists in 1955. And very pithy, he said the death penalty is medicinal. It's medicine.
It is.
The death penalty is medicinal. And you don't hear that today in Catholic circles. It's almost like it's been expunged, like we're not allowed to hear that wisdom.
Well, I'd like to add this too, to what you just said. I don't know if there's been a study made on this or not, but I wouldn't be surprised if a disproportionate number of the Catholics who are vehemently opposed to the death penalty under any circumstances don't have much problem with abortion.
There could be a correlation, you're right. But for most people, that's two separate issues.
Yeah. Well, that's because they don't understand the sacredness of human life. Let's face it. I'll just make this comment. Jesus Christ, at every instant of his existence, from his incarnation onward, was sacred at every moment. Now, if abortion is okay, then that means that Jesus Christ wasn't sacred from the time of his conception until the time of his delivery. And same for the Blessed Virgin Mary, whom we call the Immaculate Conception. How can anybody believe in the Immaculate Conception? How can anybody believe that the incarnation is great and still have no problem with abortion? It shows a complete breakdown in logic.
Thank you very much. I appreciate all of your comments and I'm humbled to be able to speak to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Yay. Thank you, Father.
Thank you for being patient.
No.
If anyone has a couple extra minutes that they can stay and help clean up, it would be appreciated. And if any of the men are interested in coming to a traditional night, Shelley Council, you can speak to this young gentleman right here, Emmanuel. There's one of the new nights right here. Okay. And I'd like to make a quick announcement. The next month's